Twinmotion, in a nutshell, is a real-time visualization tool for creating renderings, animations, panoramas, videos. We can output all of those different things from Twinmotion. It's not really a design authoring software, although it can do some basic modeling thing. We do have libraries and assets that we can bring into our Twinmotion scenes out of the box. But ultimately, you're going to be creating your designs in other programs like Revit, ArchiCAD. You could bring in Navisworks models, all different types of 3D models. Pretty much, if you can design it in 3D in some software, you can get it into Twinmotion. And we've got all different information on what types of files are supported on our support blog. So please, if you haven't and you're curious about what is supported or just any information in general about Twinmotion, visit our Imagine It page. I think I have a link towards the end of my presentation that shows you where you can go to find that information. But for the focus of this session, we're going to be talking about the lighting in Twinmotion. And fortunately for us, prior to 2020, the lighting in Twinmotion wasn't great. Once Epic purchased Twinmotion a year and a half ago, they started to include a lot of enhancements that they already had as part of their Unreal Engine. So Twinmotion is built on top of the Unreal Engine. So they started to implement more of the realism and the tools from the Unreal Engine into Twinmotion, because the complaint was that Twinmotion was great as a real-time visualization tool, but the overall output in the 2019 versions and prior to 2019 were that the scenes end up looking kind of cartoony and less realistic. And, the goal for architectural or landscape visualization is that we want to have realism. We want to make our buildings look real. We want lighting and materials to be accurate. So in 2020, huge enhancements came to the Twinmotion software. The whole lighting and shadow system was reworked to be more realistic. And the specific topics that I'm going to talk about today and these key features that are available in Twinmotion are SSGI, so screen space, global illumination, so we can see that in real time, cinematic depth of field, area lights, volumetric lights with shadows, the physical sky, and just some of the enhancements there, and then neon lights, which we can kind of see on the right side in this image. There are some neon lights as an example. So first off, I just want to kind of set the scene up here and tee this off, so you're not wondering why we're looking at an empty room with a couple of chairs. I created this model, very, very simple model, right in Revit, and I pushed this Revit model out to Twinmotion. In some of our previous recordings, we kind of talk about the process of doing that, so I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but there are two ways of translating your projects over into Twinmotion. One way is through a direct link, so we can take our Revit models. There's direct links for Revit, ArchiCAD, RICAD, and a few others. I think Navisworks will be getting one eventually, but there are a few programs out there that have this direct link plugin, which includes the ability to push our models directly into Twinmotion so that they're linked, meaning that if we update the model in our authoring software, we can push it back out to Twinmotion and those updates will be reflected. The drawback to that is that once we use the direct link and we bring our models into Twinmotion, everything's kind of static and locked down. We can't move things around that are part of the building models or the models that we're bringing in from these other softwares. So I kind of prefer to use just the standard export. So one of the file formats that is preferred with Twinmotion is FBX file, which is an Autodesk, right? Or Autodesk, whatever. Proprietary, there it is, file format that contains model geometry and materials. So we can push those over into Twinmotion. It does a pretty good job. One thing I failed and I forgot to test was the lighting between Revit into Twinmotion. I know that when you do an export to FBX, the lights are just different between Revit and Twinmotion, so the actual light source information doesn't carry through when we export FBX. I think in this 2020.2 update with Twinmotion with our direct link, I believe that The light source is replaced by a Twinmotion light source automatically when you do the direct link. Maybe I'll have time towards the end of this to just verify that and check that. But I've kind of got everything teed up right now, so I don't want to fumble around and mess with what I have set up. So yeah, kind of explain directly to export. I actually prefer to export rather than use the direct link. It just gives you more control over making edits once we get into Twinmotion, but there are benefits or pros and cons to each. What I did here to prepare this one is I exported it to FBX. So I'm going to jump right into this model inside of Twinmotion. I did take some time here to change some materials and set this one up. So these two chairs are just assets that I pulled from the Twinmotion object library. They can be found right in Twinmotion. So just two different colorful chairs. And the idea here for this first part, the thing I wanted to highlight with the lighting, is that our objects in Twinmotion create global illumination or light bouncing between materials and surfaces. It might be hard to tell on the screen right now, but we're getting a cascade of light bouncing between the wall and the chair, and it's picking up the color of the chair onto the wall. So one of the enhancements in 2020 was improved global illumination, where because of the way the real-time render works, it's bouncing different light rays. So for those of you that are not as familiar with how rendering engines work, from our light sources, we're projecting thousands of light rays from the light source, and in this case, it's a daylight. And from that daylight, it's bouncing off of the wall and it's hitting the chair. We're getting light bouncing off the back of the chair and returning that value to the wall. So we're getting some of this color. It might be easier to see here with this red chair. Oops, let me kind of move around here and get a little bit of red color on the wall here, if you could kind of pick that up. But there we go. It's a little bit. You can see as I move there we go. That's pretty good. You're seeing that red spot. So the global illumination is picking up the material from the chair, bouncing it back to the wall to give it that look. This is screen dependent. So as I start to kind of pan the screen around, watch what will happen. This tough to see red spot will completely disappear as I start to kind of get that out of the direction of my camera. So there's a couple of tricks that are being played by the rendering engine. And it's really projecting those rays sort of from our not only our light source, but from our camera. So it's kind of a directional, call it like irradiance mapping that's happening there. But the global illumination is improved, and these types of things just cause or create more realism and more realistic effect between objects. One thing I forgot to point out, and I wanted to talk about this right away before I got into showing all of this stuff. I am working on a laptop. My computer isn't the greatest, but when we do open up Twinmotion, you don't have to have the most powerful computer. We do recommend, and I've got a slide at the end here to show you what the recommended specs are, but Twinmotion will automatically determine and decide preferences based on the hardware that you have for your computer. Because I'm using a laptop that is a few years old, it's got a dedicated NVIDIA M2000M graphics card. It doesn't have a huge amount of video RAM, which is pretty important for these real-time renderers to process pretty large scenes with a lot of geometry. But my computer, for example, in the preferences, if I go to this quality setting, it defaults to medium, which you can see just based on this icon saying, hey, for a laptop, it's typically going to default to medium. In order to see a lot of the lighting effects in real time on our screen, we do want to click and set this to ultra, which is probably more suited for like a desktop, with a pretty good GPU. There are definitely laptop workstations out there that have great graphics cards. And again, I'll talk about the hardware at the end, but the recommended ones are typically the NVIDIA RTX cards, and they do make those in a GeForce and a Quadro. If you're working in really large scenes, it's recommended that you get a graphics card that's like a 1080 or sorry, a 2080 RTX with a lot of GPU RAM to process big scenes. So depending on what types of files you're working in, you probably will want to have adequate hardware to support them. Now, having said that, these quality settings, they really only affect what we're seeing in real time on our workstation or on our laptops when we're working on the scene. When you go to push and export your media, so your images, your renderings, your animations, it's going to render everything out at the ultra high quality or the highest setting. So you don't need to worry about switching this before you actually export your media from Twinmotion. So this is really just strictly for real time on our screen, what we're seeing. So in a lot of these demos, I try to stick to medium, but for this one specifically, to see a lot of the effects, I'm going to set this to ultra. So that's a reason why I wanted to have a pretty light scene initially here, and then I will switch over to a more complicated scene, and hopefully I don't burn up my system or crash. But yeah, just for the sake of the demo, to show you these features, I wanted to kind of go with the light version of it first, at an ultra high quality, and then we can talk about some other things. So yeah, the global illumination, we're getting those light bounces to happen. I put this big sphere in this model because I just wanted to show you that, that also works with reflections off of the ground, so we can start to see the ball reflecting off of the floor here. And a lot of that has to do with how that light is bouncing around and reflecting in the space. The second part to this, and one of the things I wanted to mention with specifically with a neon material or a light material, is that in Twinmotion, we do have illuminating materials, specifically neon materials. So back out of my library here and go into the materials. I'm just going to grab one of the neon light materials here, and we can see there are a few of them. And to show you how this actually interacts in the entire scene, if I click on, let's just do this multicolored neon and throw this onto this object here, we can see, and it might be tough to see this effect on the wall, especially they changed the time of the day here, more tonight, but you will be able to start to see that effect. Whoops, there we go. It's bouncing off of all of the walls. So even the color of our neon lights here, we're lighting up the space. It's going through, it's cascading through different options, and you see the walls are changing based on that light source. So just kind of emphasize how that global illumination is working. I do have an area light in here that's it's probably drowning out this effect a little bit. Just turn that off real quick. We're going to put that, there it is. Turn off the area light. There we go. So you can really see how the colors are bouncing off. So we're getting those light rays bouncing around. That's all part of that global illumination. In illuminating objects like this, we can control things like their glow. So you start to see it's almost like a volumetric light, and I am messing up my exposure value by changing these settings. So so we'll probably just want to delete that sphere out of here and get back to normal. All right. So those are a few things with the global illumination and the neon light objects. Now for normal lighting, and the reason I created this way, I did assign a neon light to this light fixture that I brought in from my Reddit model. So you can see you can use those neon lights or self-illuminating materials to kind of create lighting effects from objects. This does not project out an IES light source. So in order to get pretty realistic lighting, we probably would want to use a combination of a self-illuminating material on our fixtures like this one, and then also put in a light source over the top of it, so we kind of have two things playing together at once. So in Twinmotion, we do have a whole folder here dedicated to different lights, and you can see we've got omni lights, spotlights, neon, area lights, and then a whole bunch of these are all IES lights that are based off of photometric web IES files. And if you have custom IES files, that's great. We can actually change the IES file. So you could start with one of these different light types. Let me just kind of drop this into the scene to show you. This one looks cool. So I'll put this on the ceiling. The little orange lines that we see are attenuation graphic. So that means that Right now, if there was anything actually in the sphere, we'd see this light hitting it and working. But since my attenuation isn't far enough, we're really not seeing the effect of that light anywhere. Well, you do have the ability to adjust the setting, and you can see as I spread out that attenuation factor, we are getting that light washing the wall, hitting the floor. We can change the intensity of that light. We can change the color or the temperature of the light. We can turn the light on and off and animate this as well. We could change the angle of the light. So if we wanted to perform more like a spotlight, now I would argue that, with IES files and light distribution, we start messing around with the actual angle of that. We're not getting the true effect of the IES. So we probably would want to use some of those defaults. But let's see here. And where's that setting for the IES file? There it is. So under the light properties, we can go into more settings for the light, and this is actually where this IES file exists. So this is just prepackaged with Twinmotion, but if you did download an IES file from a manufacturer, if you have your own IES libraries, you just have to click this, choose open, browse for your IES files, and that's going to change the light source information. So important thing here too is being able to turn the shadows on or off. Let me just drag that, just reuse this chair, throw it in here. So right now with the lights off, you can see that obviously it's going to light the chair up, but we're not getting any shadows from it. So if we want the light to project shadows, you just simply click that button, and now we're getting shadows from that chair. So you can see all of this stuff happens in real time on my screen. We can adjust those different settings with the light, the attenuation, and then these also have some additional features. And while I'm showing this, it kind of gets into more of the volumetric effects from the lights, but since I have it here, I'm going to show it. Shadows are turned on right now. If I click the more button under shadows, we can turn on these volumetric shadows. Once those are on, and then we turn on our haze, we're actually going to get this kind of beaming type of foggy light coming from our light source. So this can be used for a lot of different things. If we're trying to get light cascading or showing like dust particles within a space, we could put a light outside of a window and have it kind of cascade in that sort of ray or that dusty looking light effect. We can also adjust the lighting or this effect, so we can change the intensity. If I don't want it as intense, I can start to turn that down. You see that renders out in real time. The speed actually just affects, it might be hard to see, but there is some jitter to the fog, the way it's moving through. The faster you place this, the more sort of particles or the faster the dust that the light bouncing off of is moving in the space. So speed just creates a different type of effect that can be animated. Probably for something in a scene that's kind of clear, we would probably want that speed to be pretty low for an interior scene if we have light coming in through a window. Maybe for an exterior scene where it might be a little bit foggier outside, or we might get some more haze or smog, speed would be something to show that fog moving really well. This tiling effect just makes the effect more or less consistent. So what I mean by that is if I increase my tiling, it starts to break up and make that really look like more of a fog. If we bring it down, it's more uniform and clean. So again, just some different effects with that volumetric lighting. But things like this, we would post-process something like this and have to create volume lights and things in 3ds Max. It's not crazy complicated, but I really do like that Twinmotion, we can see this effect happening in real time. You'll notice that, again, my computer, because it's not the greatest, we start to see some alaging effects up here by the top of the cone. But when this renders, it would be nice and smooth. So, some pretty cool stuff with the volumetric lights. Now, getting back to how you might manage if you did bring in a file from Revit, let me delete the slide back out here. Something in a workaround, I guess, that we could use if we're exporting a file out and we want to throw in or replace all of our light fixtures or make sure that all of our light fixtures do have a light source to them. Within Revit, you could create duplicates of your fixtures, or you could create some other type of family and put it right over, maybe in the same spot as the fixture. One of the options that we have in Twinmotion is to select from our scene selection. We can select multiple elements. So I've seen where customers will use, we call them like a dummy object or almost like a proxy object, where you would just sort of have a placeholder where all of your lights are, and you could swap those out with an actual light source. So if I'm just using these 2x4 lights here and right click over them and choose replace object, we could replace all of these with an actual light source. Well, that's great, but it is going to get rid of my fixture and just put a hole in the ceiling. So it might not be the best example of this, but we could definitely add additional families or something duplicated within the Revit file. I'd almost just do, for this case, the easiest way, because I did this as an import rather than a link. I can take these objects and I should be able to just duplicate them down. So I'm just holding my shift key down and dragging these lights kind of just right in front of the existing light. And I'll make those a copy and not an instance. Now that I've got my copy here, I can select all of these, replace these objects with, I'll just use Spotlight. There we go. I don't know why those went all the way to the ground, but since they're all still selected, let me try here. Where is my Gizmo for them? That's the question. Gizmo's hidden. But now that these are placed, so ideally I would have wanted that to replace right there, but I can grab each of these. I don't know why it wasn't letting me select. Let's see if I can grab all of them at once. There we go. That was weird. I thought the Gizmo would show up for all, but we just put the lights in front of our fixtures, and you can see why I would want to put that neon material on one of the lights, because if we don't, we get the effect that light's coming from these things, but if they're black, we don't see any light coming from them. So it might be a good idea to just kind of pick your material and replace it with neon or change it out. What's nice about this is now that these lights all exist within Twinmotion, so we can edit them, the color and everything, the spread, all in Twinmotion. Had I done those as an instance, I don't think it would have really mattered, because they're all still separate entities because I brought them in from Revit. But just kind of a quick trick there that I like to show people. If we do have these fixtures, we can just copy them down, duplicate them slightly, swap them out using that method. And then we can grab these individual lights, or grab them all at once, I guess, over in our scene selector and start to adjust the properties of them. So it's kind of the, I guess, the artificial lighting side of Twinmotion and the way that these things work. Again, like I mentioned, we can change intensity. You'll see that in real time, the exposure value or the exposure control within my scene is being updated. So it lags a little bit, but it does catch up. So if we start to make this really intense light, it might take it a second for the exposure to adjust. Or if I go, down a little bit, it takes a second. Same with if you're changing the time of the day when you have lighting. If I make this more of a bright time of the day, we're not really seeing the effect of the light because the day lighting is washing that out. But when you go to adjust your settings for your lighting, you are able to start to adjust your exposure values. So this is the other side to the settings of lighting, where we can adjust, make it overexposed, underexposed. And if it's underexposed, we should start to see maybe that light still washing it out. So I would need to make the intensity of my spotlights a lot stronger in this case for them to show up during the daytime. Is it even affecting these? I don't know. Oh, that is odd. It's not updating here on my screen. So just a few different things playing together that you have to tinker around with or tool around with. Let's see. Lights on. I don't know why we can't see what's happening. I bet if I rendered this, though, it would show this light, which might not be a great example of that, but it's almost like now my lights are. Ah, there we go. What the heck? Took it a minute to catch up, but it's probably my computer struggling here. Okay. So, all right. So I've touched on the different lights, different placement of lights. There is an area light. So let me just turn off these lights real quick that I've just placed in here. If we've got a really dark scene, or if we want to highlight the entire scene without having to place in a whole bunch of direct lights, you do have the option for the lighting here to place an area light. And the area light is simply just kind of a large light object that we can place and move around within the space, and you can see it starts to light up almost like an omni light, but it is more of a volumetric type of light where we can turn our shadows on and do that volumetric shadow stuff I showed before with the other light types. But you can adjust the length and the width of this area of this volume box. We can change the color, the intensity, and obviously, again, turn that light on and off. So area lights are an option. You saw some of the other lights in here. You do have omni lights, which are a little bit different. Instead of being an area length times width times height, an omni light is more of a globe. So same properties, except it's controlled by a radius. So maybe a little bit more natural looking in this scene than the area light. But again, all the same settings, change the intensity and color and all of that. Okay. So the last thing I want to show kind of with just the standard lighting stuff is that we do have a physically based sun and sky environment built into Twinmotion. This scene is not the best at showing this off, so let me go ahead and I'm going to open up. I've got a model that has a little bit more in it than this one, kind of show this off. So hopefully it does it justice. I'll do a no hierarchy one. Okay. Swap the scene out. Let's see, why is this? Here we go. Just had to catch up here. So a couple of things I want to show in here just with the physical sky. And again, you can see because I'm on that ultra high quality, it's struggling more in a scene like this that has all of these trees and everything. There's just a lot more geometry going on here. But some of the really cool enhancements or features with our sun and sky, if I start to zoom into, maybe I should switch this. Let me get in position so I don't crash in the middle of it. Go to medium. So you can see the difference at medium. It just does not look the same. But let me get closer to looking at, where's our sun? There's the sun disk. And drop down here just a bit through the trees so we get some of that effect happening. So you can see here, there's some light bouncing, some cool stuff happening in real time with the light and the trees. Now, if I set this back to that ultra high quality, let's see what the effect looks like here. So we're really starting to see a better effect. You can see how the trees are sort of a translucent material where some of that light's coming through. We're getting some really nice shadows and stuff happening here. As we start to change the actual time of the day, maybe to more of a morning. I think I did turn on in this file. I think I had like smog or something turned on. So let's try to get to earlier in the day. So we get this nice foggy effect. We'll let the exposure catch back up to it. There we go. Uh-oh. Maybe a little too overexposed. Come on, computer, catch up. Oh yeah, it's doing it's definitely lagging behind a little bit here. I should probably have just paid attention to the time of the day. So that would be at night. It's not that late. Maybe it's because it's fall. Let's set this more at like 6 in the morning. Sorry, it's a reverse of what we're used to. Slide up. There we go. Let's set this like 6 in the morning here so we get kind of that early morning sunrise effect. See the exposure control trying to catch up here, but we start to see some of the physical sky effects, the environment effects, the clouds and everything in here are all controlled by your weather and location settings. So really important thing to get your global illumination and sky models correct is you definitely want to properly locate your project. By default, it's in France, so we just kind of let's drag this to the US somewhere, probably in like Nebraska or something. So it changes, the sky model for that. We can set the time of the day here as well as up in the I button, set the month of the year and our north offset. So if we really want to adjust where that sun is located and the position of our project, we have all of the controls for that. The default, and I know this is going to be a question that comes up, so I'll just answer it right off the bat. HDRI images are not supported yet. I know it's something on the wish list, and I believe that the folks at Epic are developing that into Twinmotion. So we can't bring our custom background HDRI maps into Twinmotion yet using, I guess, the native tools. There are some workarounds where you could bring in like a globe and have a material for your HDRI on that globe and do some different things. I don't think the quality of it is that great. So kind of getting into what I was about to mention here, there are a preset of different types of background environments that we can choose from. So right now I have this set to countryside. If I zoomed out, we'd see some, actually looks like, yeah, these must be buildings for that countryside, but we can set this to different backgrounds like mountains, and then it's just going to change the environment map or that ties into the background. It's not like a sky environment's tied to that or anything. It is strictly just a map or a material, and we can rotate that around. It's hard to see right now, but as I start to rotate it, you see the mountains start to move within the background. Okay, so yeah, the physical sky model is updated. It does support weather changes as well. And in the 2020.2 release, we have better particles from rain and snow. So if we do start to turn on these different settings within the environment, so we just get into weather here. If we make our season, let's make it summer, let's make it a rainy day. You'll see that the clouds start to come in as I move these sliders. So this is all just baked into our Twinmotion settings. If I make it really cloudy, we're starting to see some of the puddling and the rain effects on the ground. So really flooding out my ground here. That's kind of interesting that the ground would start to look like that. Highly reflecting. So as I start to slide this back, we'll get more of, I guess, maybe not quite a natural flooding effect here, but there we go. More of like a pooling effect from the rain. And then we can get into winter and you're going to see that change. The sky, but the thing I want to point out with the environment is that the sky does update as we start to change the weather. So if we want it to be more cloudy, we can make it more cloudy. We'll start to see these are snowflakes falling. And maybe it's just the time of the day that I'm at. So ultimately, we can control all these things, turn our particles on. We can adjust smog, which is, related to volumetric lighting, just like I had with the lighting here. This is more environmental though. So the more smog that you include, the foggier the background. Change the time of the day, later in the day, just to lighten this up a bit. Catch up. There we go. Change the weather back. Okay, so I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and then I'll look through the Q&A and look at the questions here, is let me jump back up to the rooftop area. So just grab one of these. I think I have this lower terrace set up. Get that to update. Cool. So we do see some of the effects of the light coming through. Some of our camera effects we can change, like the lens flare to different types. Quit the media mode. Let's just make this weather go away. Okay. And that's caught up. Okay. So yeah, some of the other effects that we have are controls over the individual lighting. So I showed you this with the exposure we can change. We can change our white balance if you want the scene to look like cooler, blue light or warmer yellowish light. We want to make sure our global illumination is turned on to get that light bouncing between objects. We could change the amount that our shadows are detected. So the higher that you make this, probably the slower your computer will run. It's just kind of creating the effects of shadows at a further distance. And then with settings, we have sun reflectance, star intensity at night if we really want the stars to shine. And then ambient lighting, which just creates more of that sort of light bouncing from our light sources. So you start to flood the light out. I've found that keeping that set 1 is usually a pretty good idea, unless I'm really trying to get a different type of effect, maybe with volumetric fog. But beyond that, with their camera settings, we do have lens flare that we can create. There's also, I want to show this with depth of field. So let me just drop in a person in here real quick. So I know the example that we have posted up to our blog, and that's another thing too. We have some links to pretty much everything I'm covering in this presentation. We've got these on our blog site. So let me just bring in this person here. It's animated person. Get in close. Looks like she's putting some lipstick on. Let's change that. Let's just make her idle. Just standing. Okay. And we're going to zoom in just a bit. Get right up close to her here for depth of field. So this is an effect that I think definitely, if you do have a better GPU, you start to see this better in real time on your computer. But there we go. That should work. These things are in the background and we can adjust that. So with the camera settings and depth of field, if I have this turned on, in more settings, there are 2 ways we can set where our focus for depth of field is, and we can change our depth of field. So first off, I think the best way to actually see good depth of field is kind of zoom into your field of view to get the person in. So you can even see how she's starting to blur out here. We're going to make her the focus. But to focus on an object, there is this little focus button. And if I click on her, oops, get that. It automatically changes our distance setting. So now that this woman is in focus and the stuff in the background is kind of starting to blur out, we can start to adjust and change the way that this effect looks. If we want to change the aperture or change the background, the lower the aperture, the more blurry the background becomes, and the more, I guess, not more in focus, but it just appears like she's more in focus because the background's so blurry. So the lower the aperture, the more intense this effect for depth of field is. If I start to move this up, it's just increasing that depth of field distance automatically with our aperture size. So we're not getting that effect as much on the close object. So it's all pretty cool. And all of these effects can be exported when we do our media exports. So they will have this effect. The bokeh shape, if we've got 12, right now it's set to 12, the more sides, so this is all based on shape for lens flare, basically. If I look, I get the sun, where's the sun? If we're getting lens flare, really all I need to point out for this, or any type of lighting with lens flare, the higher this value, the more rounded the flare effect is, all the way down to, I think it goes all the way down to 4 being the minimum. So you would get your lens flare looking like a square as opposed to some type of polygon. So it's just an effect on how round that is. It goes all the way up to 16 to make really round lens flare. All right. I'll demonstrate a walkthrough how this ties together. Let me set this back to kind of a not bad quality, but medium quality. So I'm not going to have all this lag to show this one. All right, cool. Once you have your Twinmotion scene set up, when you're going to output your media, we have this area down here dedicated to media where we can output images, panoramas, videos. In the 2020.2 release, we now have phasing for simulating different construction phases if we want, so we can show the building sort of being simulated and built. But with this, if we wanted to do a walkthrough, you just click on video and do create video. Basically, that video is going to capture whatever we're looking at in the first frame. So right now, we call this a keyframe. If I want my video to maybe just start looking in this direction, let me refresh this frame so we get that captured. And then as I start to move through the environment, so I can start to move through and look in different areas, all we have to do is add additional keyframes. And then this starts to create our walkthrough sequence. So it's not exactly the same as a keyframe in 3ds Max, where we've got the slider at the bottom and we set individual keys within the keyframe, but it's really kind of done, I guess, in a more, you could consider this a more intuitive way, where you're starting to capture different frames to create your walkthrough. And we can have different parts too. So like if this was part 1, I could create a part 2 that is going to transition to outside of the building or something like that. And we could have multiple parts as part of our same walkthrough or animation. But when we're in media mode like this, we can animate the turning on and turning off of lights. So to answer that question, right now, if we start this at nighttime, say I just set my setting here for location, maybe at the first frame, it's daylight here. I can go back to my media mode, refresh that to make sure we're looking up in the sky at the beginning. And as we transition to inside, let's go into this frame, go into the time and change that to more of a nighttime. If I had lights in here, I could also turn them on and off between those frames, and it would save that. So maybe automatically, it's not going to automatically click that light on or off, but I actually think there is a setting, now that I think of it, where let me just double check here for lights. So now that you bring that up, there is, as under lighting, maybe settings, I thought that there was one in here that has, maybe it's per light. So back up to the light and put a spotlight in here. Is it for this? No. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so dusk to dawn, we can turn that on within the light and have that automatically turn on and off. So we could either animate it so that it's kind of slowly, I guess, I think from dusk to dawn, it kind of slowly turns that light on as soon as it transitions, or you can animate it turning on and off just using the state of the scene graph. So yeah, sorry about that. Totally brain fart there. Just forgot about that setting. So yeah, we can turn that on with our lights. And as we change the time of the day, the light turns off. So just in system requirements, let me go from the current slide here. For those of you that are wondering, these are the system requirements. So with any real-time render, whether it's Twinmotion, Enscape, Lumion, they're going to require some pretty beefed up graphics cards. So that's probably the most important thing, is a good graphics card with a good amount of memory based on the size of your scene. So the minimum specs are definitely adequate specs. If you have these specs, you're going to be running Twinmotion fine. The recommended specs are going to basically, if you have these specs met, what you're looking at in real time on your screen is almost identical to the output that you're going to receive when you actually output your media. I'm not a Mac user, so this is all kind of foreign to me, but I can tell you that with the GPU, we want that probably dedicated GPU card, not an integrated GPU. For comparison, what you've seen in the presentation, these are my system specs for my computer. I do have a lot of RAM, regular memory, but I don't have a ton of video RAM, only 4 gigs. We do have some training options. We have a full day training course where we go through topics like lighting, materials, putting your scenes together, and we can also provide custom training. I mentioned that we have a link here to some really good resources that Lisa and myself and my team on the Twinmotion side we've put up there. So we've recorded a lot of videos like this. We've got a lot of content directly from the Epic people up there, tutorials, and really good resource. So kind of a one-stop shop for all things related to Twinmotion if you're looking to get into a deeper dive.